Hi, Jenni here, and in December I obviously love to read Christmas books, but I feel like in the past couple of years they have been a bit of a hit or miss, but I think I struggled this year. Like I said in my previous video, I don't intend to read much more like intense books for this year because I've read so much, but then this book ended up being a bit, emotive, even though that was not my goal. I've been keeping up with Dua Lipa's book club, Service 95 Book Club, and I've read quite a few books from there, but also I've skipped on those books for a couple of months now. They didn't seem to be of my taste. So when I saw the new December book, I was intrigued immediately by the cover. It was stunning. And then the concept of it got me to read the book. It's called, in English, Brightly Shining, and it's written by Ingvild H. Rishøi, and the translator is Caroline Waits. And I tried to find this book in our library and I couldn't. I don't think it has been translated into Finnish. So I ended up buying the ebook, which was thankfully only €4. And immediately I was intrigued by the premise of the book. Basically, it tells the story of two sisters, Ronja, who is 10 years old, and Melissa, who is 16 years old. Ronja is our protagonist. They live with their single father, who unfortunately has some issues with alcohol, and because of his alcoholism, he has not been able to keep a job. So, trigger warning, I will be discussing that in this video. This video will contain some spoilers, but I do hope that even if you get spoiled a little bit, I really hope you still read this book because it was phenomenal. So the book opens with Ronja seeing that there's an open spot to sell Christmas trees, and she goes home and shows this to her father. And she's very excited and very hopeful about this position and about her dad getting a job. Her sister, Melissa, who I said was 16 years old, is a bit more reserved in her excitement and kind of very seemingly has been let down by her father so many times that she doesn't really get excited about this listing. But their dad ends up getting the job. And this causes Ronja to dream about having a Christmas tree and actually celebrating Christmas properly. All the while, Melissa does not have her hopes up for her dad to keep this job for a long while. And that already was so heartbreaking that Melissa, who was still a child, yes, 16, so much older than Ronja, but a child shouldn't have to be that disappointed in their parent. And I think it was clear to me that in the book, the father isn't described as this kind of a villain character, but that his alcoholism does cause issues and instability within the family and for the children. Then their dad does lose the job due to his alcoholism. Melissa kind of decides that, okay, I will take on that Christmas tree selling job then, since he couldn't keep up with it. Of course, it shows bravery and responsibility and just this kind of maturity from Melissa, but I think it also shows like determination in like wanting to take care of her and her sister and like taking the matter into her own hands. But at the same time, I felt really awful reading it because a child shouldn't have to take care of her siblings. A child should be able to trust their parent to take care of them. But I feel like all of these themes were discussed very nuancedly. Is that a word? In a very nuanced way without like making you pity for the characters. Now, whilst their dad isn't really able to take care of them, they do have some adult characters in the book who do kind of take care of them. One of them is their neighbor Andersen, who in small ways takes care of Ronja and Melissa. For example, there is a scene where Ronja needs a dress for Sancta Lucia, a Saint Lucia celebration at school, and she doesn't have one. And Melissa goes and finds her old dress and then Andersen helps to iron the dress. It's those small moments that show that the girls are being taken care of, but they still have to manage on their own, if that makes sense. What I really liked in this book is that there is this whole Christmas spirit throughout the story, but it does not feel like a overwhelmingly picture perfect version of Christmas like Christmas books tend to usually be. There is heartbreak, there is turmoil, there are setbacks, but it still has the spirit of wanting to be happy on Christmas, having a lovely Christmas for the girls. And I feel like the writer really brings that out, that even though they literally do not have money to have all these Christmas celebrations that maybe their friends do, they still try their best to navigate through that. There are other characters who really care for them. I mentioned Andersen, a fellow employee who also works with Melissa, is a much older man, maybe in his 30s, who also like takes care of them and like makes sure that they're okay. Then there's also Ronja's school friend Musse and his father, who also make sure that Ronja is fine. And when Ronja is ill, they insist that she gets help and goes to her sister and so on. The ending is very heartbreaking. I will not share that here. In a way, it was very dreamlike, that you can kind of interpret it in many ways. It was heartbreaking because it shows that even though Melissa and Ronja tried their best to take care of each other and other people tried to take care of them as well, sometimes that is not enough. And I don't know, maybe it's just because I'm Finnish, but I feel like Christmas always has this layer of melancholy to it. And I feel like this book captures that feeling really, really well. And it doesn't mean that we're sad on Christmas. It's just, there is just this atmosphere at times of melancholy and sorrow. What I also really liked about the book is that it's written from Ronja's perspective. The main character is 10 years old, so she is naive, she is hopeful, and she is childlike. I don't think the writing is childish, so I feel like it's very, very fitting for adults to read as well. So after a couple of years of hit or miss Christmas books, this was a really pleasant surprise and made me emotional, and I just couldn't put it down. I was so invested in Ronja and Melissa and just wanted them to be okay. It was also then really great to hear from the author herself. Dua Lipa always interviews the authors whose books she has chosen for her book club, and those always give so much insight into the book itself, and I learned a lot more through that interview. I think the only downside for me, or like something that was a bit unclear to me, is that there was this character mentioned here and there, but they were not like a major part of the plot. And Ronja called them Ladyman. I do not know what that means, and it would have been nice to hear Ronja kind of discuss that a bit more, like, what do you mean, Ladyman? But again, it's from a child's perspective, so maybe the author thought that she would just like mention this in passing because seeing this character is part of Ronja's daily life, but not so much that they would devote more time to this character. After I finished this book, and while I was watching Dua Lipa's interview with Ingvild Rishøi, I realized that there was a movie adaptation of this book. I mean, they talked about it in the interview, and they even talked about how it differs from the book. And I thought, well, I really hope it's aired in Finland, but I didn't have high hopes for it. But lo and behold, it is being shown here in my city, and it actually just premiered last week. So here are my thoughts about the movie adaptation.
I just got home from watching Brightly Shining, the movie adaptation, and it was absolutely wonderful. I feel like it added a lot to the book, even though it's the same story. The author actually was one of the screenwriters for the movie, so the added things and changed things worked really well, and again added a lot to the story. I think the themes of poverty and child neglect and alcoholism were very delicately discussed, and yeah, there were no like villain characters, like even though the dad is hurting his children with his alcoholism, his portrayal is still very human, if that makes sense. Sorry about the changing lighting. The hockey game is on, of course we're watching it. I love that they showed more of Ronja and Muse's friendship than in the book, at least that's how I felt. And casting was absolutely perfect. And yeah, the character of Lady Man, at least I assume, was a trans woman. So I don't know if it was like a translation mistake or the writer tried to like view this character from a child's perspective. But yeah, I feel like Lady Man is not an appropriate way to describe this character, especially when they don't get a name. But there was an added scene between this character and Ronja, which I thought was really, really lovely. I also wondered about translation, and I think this is just me because I have a master's in English, was that there was this character caretaker, but he was really a janitor of the school. So I wasn't envisioning a janitor character when I was reading, but it worked. If you do not want to read the book but are interested in the story but don't want to read the book because it might be too depressing, I definitely recommend this movie. A very excellent adaptation. Some other Christmas themed books that I've read in the past years is The Christmas Bookshop by Jenni, and I think the first part of the book series is really, really lovely. It tells the story of Carmen, who is kind of lost in her life. She has a job, but I think she was about to lose it, or that it wasn't paying enough for her, and she was living at home and she was trying to figure out her next steps, but really was coming up short. But she then ends up moving in with her sister, who is a lawyer and has children and is married and has a beautiful home. And Carmen ends up working at the Christmas bookshop and kind of turning it around. And I think the book, it was a really lovely journey in this character trying to be a bit better and trying to evolve and grow. And I really loved the first book, and it had such exquisite, lovely Christmas vibes, which is why I was so excited for Midnight at the Christmas bookshop, because it was the sequel to my beloved Christmas book by Jenni, and it was huge disappointment. All that character development that Carmen had in the first book, completely done, like it never happened. She was still a mess, she was still mean, she was still very sarcastic, which is not a bad thing, but you know, and just very unlikable, to be honest. And that's all fine and well, you know, growth is never linear, but it did give me this very strong, like, why was the first book even written if Jenni was just gonna undo everything that happened in the first book? Now the second book ended up having a sweet ending, but it did ruin the first book for me, and I was really, really disappointed in that book. So I'm really happy that I found this Christmas book, Brightly Shining, because it is absolutely excellent. What are your favorite Christmas books? Do you go for the classics? Do you do contemporary? Do you like romance Christmas books? Let me know in the comments below. Next week will be this year's last video. That's wow, this year has gone by so quickly, and it will be my jenskosmos Book Awards video. I'm still in the middle of choosing what categories I will include and what books I will award. Honestly, I've read so many incredible books this year that I am having trouble choosing just one for each category. Alright, I hope you enjoyed this Christmas video, and I hope I see you in the next one. Bye!